Witam Państwo I witam je Państwo. Ukrainian civil society is most influential in the world now, as Dmitry pointed out already. But it took 25 years. I'll try to put up a 25 years history in 5 minutes. Challenge, right? So, 25 years ago, students set up a tent camp in a central square of Kyiv capital city and occupied it for 15 days. They were on hunger strike and they were posting an array of political demands, including the major one that mandatory military service should be limited to the territory of Ukraine. So the hunger strike lasted for 15 days. The students reached most objectives, and the first satisfied demand was that the military service was limited to Ukraine. You see them. Since then, people started to call this square Maidan Nezalezhnosti or Independence Square. This name became legit after Ukraine announced its independence, and all Maidans started there. 15 years ago, missing journalist Georgy Gangadze was suspected to be assassinated by order of President Kuchma. Government denied his death and introduced media censorship. Journalist friends set up a tent camp and started an occupation strike demanding president's impeachment. The protests united... what? Well, something's not going... Oh, no, no. Okay, thanks. Sorry. The protests united opposition parties and activist groups. To break through the government information blockade, protest leaders decided to set up a website. The linguist Alexander Bogomolov came up with the name for this protest, for this website, for this protest, Maidan. According to his definition, Maidan is an occupation strike at the central square of the city. Protest was not successful. President Kuchma's third full term, beheaded Gangadze's body was found, and the trial is still continuing. This protest was called Ukraine without Kuchma. It was the first Maidan. 11 years ago, on the dawn of a cold November day, the tent camp was set up and occupation strike started to protest the falsified election, results of president's election. You may have heard about it already. Maidan lasted for weeks in Kyiv and other cities of Ukraine, including my native Kharkiv. The strike ended with the inauguration of President Yushchenko. The Orange Revolution united efforts of political parties, oppositions, and NGOs. NGOs played a vital role in maintaining the infrastructure of protests and fundraising. 9 years ago, after the parliamentary election, a Socialist Party left the Democratic Coalition, forming majority with reactionary parties, thus violating promises to its electors. The tent camp was set up with major demand to President dismiss the parliament and announce new elections. After 9 months of protests, President dismissed the parliament. 5 years ago, Parliament voted for tax code, which could destroy small business in Ukraine completely. Tent camp was set up with demand to veto the code. Protests were lasting countrywide until government complied with demands partially. The slogan in the center says, "Revolution will be." 3 years ago, Parliament voted for the language law, perceived as a threat to Ukrainian language. An occupation strike started in Kyiv and other towns of Ukraine. Citizens demanded to recall the law. The protest was not successful. It was dismissed by brute police force. 17 months ago. The Euromaidan, or Revolution of Dignity, is the first real revolution in terms of political science, as it changes the political order, social order. The key for its success is the continuity of the protests, tradition, and the lessons Ukrainian civic society learned from every success and failure and repressions. Euromaidan was joint action of civil society and politicians. However, this time, for the first time, Civil society became the major driver forcing politicians to act when they tried to avoid actions. And this trend continues. And the civil society firmly pushes governments to reform and implements what Jan Zielonka called as monitoring democracy. Euromaidan formed first volunteer military regiments and created the broad network of volunteers supporting the military. All efforts of politicians to create organized Maidans were not successful. Maidans are fundamentally civic. Most students striking during the revolution on Granit, the first one, participated in all Maidans for 25 years. Each Maidan involved new organized and which carried the cause further. Communities instrumental to infrastructure of protests were networking inter-Maidans. The Maidan website, which I represent, was one of the major networking tools for civil society for 13 years. And now I ask rhetorical question, whether any intelligence service in the world could provide such continuity. Some people wonder when the next Maidan will occur in Ukraine. I hope there will be no need in such extreme protest technology, as our country is firmly set up to the path of transit to democracy. However, it should play, actually, it's video, but for some reason it doesn't. Okay, but it's very beautiful. It's Maidan of 2013. So you are just seeing the movie. However, every new Ukrainian government should know the Ukrainian people will stand up again if we see violations of democracy. We already know how. Thank you.